Hola. Good afternoon. We are seconds away from starting this wonderful panel, so just making sure we're all set up with our mics. I hope that you are in the right panel. If you're not, stay because it will be fabulous anyway. So enjoy, enjoy this panel. ¿Listos? Thank you all for joining us for this conversation. Before we begin, I do want to make sure that we give a huge thank you to the EPN organizers who were so intentional in adding new voices and different perspectives, so give it up for them. And of course, a big thank you to the wonderful people here at the Cathedral who are helping us host the 3 different workshops that are happening today and our closing service. So I know that we have Padre Simon who is here at the Cathedral, so please give our thanks and love to all of the wonderful people working behind the scenes to make this a great experience for everyone.
I will do that for you all.
We have been hearing for many, many years a new article, a new report that keeps saying the church is dying. Every so often, those come out. The priest I grew up with will always send me a panic text or email saying, have you seen this new article? You're in a seminary, what are you doing? So these articles have been happening for a while. And I always answer with, the population's not dying. So what is this saying about our churches and our leadership? Maybe we're just not meeting the people out in our communities who are different, who are maybe are not used to our fabulous Episcopal liturgy or Episcopal lingo. So what does it mean to go out and meet the people who are now in our communities around our church? This panel, we're gonna be discussing a part of those communities because, as we heard in an earlier panel, by 2045, people of color will be the majority in the United States. By 2050, 2016, 1/3 of the US population will be Latino. So what does this tell all of you? That if we are going to do any good work at growing the church and welcoming new people, we have to start, well, we should have started a long time ago, but we can start now. Start to learn how do we welcome Latinos. Where the church is growing is in Latino ministry and in Asian ministry. That's where we're seeing the growth. So being able to understand culture is going to be very important. In this panel, we're going to be discussing some of the gifts, some of the challenges, and maybe give you some insight of things that you can try. And we're hoping that we'll have time for questions because we hope that you have questions for us. So with that said, I want to give a huge thank you to our panelists who are going to introduce themselves in a minute. Let me start off by introducing myself. I'm the Reverend Nancy Aide Frausto Renteria, Director of Latinx Studies at the Seminary of the Southwest, and I will be moderating this panel. And por favor.
Sí, my name is Jaime Briceño. I'm the rector of St. Michael and All Angels in Berwyn. We're the outside of Chicago, one of the suburbs. And we have a 100% Hispanic church there in Berwyn.
Simon Bautista Betances, one of the priests working here at Christ Church Cathedral, and Latino missionary here, and from Dominican Republic originally. So I'm so happy to be able to speak with you all this evening.
My name is Pedro Lopez, and I'm from Colombia in South America. I came here when I was 21 and became an Episcopalian in 2004. I've been a priest for 20 years now in the Episcopal Church.
Gracias. So together, we have about 75 years worth of experience right here. So feel free to ask us all the questions, and we might give you an answer. So my first question for the panelists today is, what gifts do Latinos bring to the Episcopal Church?
I would like to start just indicating some of them, which I believe are not unique of the Latino people, but they are deeply rooted in my own identity. And I have seen this as I was growing up in Dominican Republic, and as I was pretty much, embracing nature over there, hope. A huge sense of hope, realistic hope, and faith that, tomorrow is going to be brighter than today. Endurance, and a huge power for resiliency.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can add to that tremendous vitality. I think one of the gifts that Hispanics bring to this country is their younger families. They're all very young. They're all in their 40s and 50s. And even with that young age, you might find 3 generations of grandpa, grandma, and a younger kid. And that brings a tremendous vitality to our Episcopal Church. We have also, in the Latino population of this country, a deeply rooted sense of theology that goes beyond what you would imagine standard Episcopalian has, even with many years of going to church. Because thankfully, part of their religious understanding is cultural, and the gift that the churches back in Latin America gave us during the 90s and during the 80s was a tremendous turn towards liberation theology. So even though you might not express it in these terms, they are cultural liberation theologians. And they might not be able to express it in those ways, but I just speak to them. You see their inclination. They look for that hope, right? That hope of the future, the hope of the church that is not here yet, but is coming. That hope that is bringing them liberation, they giving them peace, giving them an opportunity to be themselves.
Thank you.
Well, I think the Latino community in the U.S. and the Episcopal Church is very diverse. We have mestizo Latinos, we have Afro Latinos, we have white Latinos, we have all kinds, very diverse and rich in many, many ways. We also have many generations. We have Latinos that have been here for 10-year generations, and we have Latinos that just came in. I worked with all the generations throughout these 20 years, and right now I'm working in a community where I work with first, second, and third generation mostly. But we're looking to reach out to the, 4th and 5th generation that are around there, but we have to reach them in English. So there's this huge richness and diversity in the Latino community.
Thank you for bringing it up. And we were just asked to speak a little bit louder when we were speaking to the mics. First things, misconceptions when we talk about Latino ministry. Most people think that it's monolingual Spanish, recently arrived in the U.S. So thank you, Padre Pedro, for being very clear. 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th generation who are more comfortable with English. Some of us, 1.5 and 2nd generation, are really comfortable with Spanglish. So just kind of understanding those nuances is important. And just like in this panel, we have a Mexicana, Costa Rica, Dominicano, y Colombiano. Not everyone in Latino ministry, I know I shouldn't say this, but I'm just going to say it. Not everyone in Latino ministry is Mexican and likes mariachi.
Though I love mariachi.
I mean, I love mariachi too, but just FYI, get to know the Latinos around your neighborhood. Not every Latino celebrates Guadalupe on December 12th. So those are important things to talk about when we are discussing how do we welcome new people into our communities that are Latino, Hispanic, Latine, Latinx, and yes, the word is controversial, but we're going to embrace all of them because we're all inclusive here, right? So my next question for the panel is, what challenges do we encounter in creating beloved community in diverse worshiping communities? So what are the challenges?
Well, let me start. I think there are a lot of challenges because the Episcopal Church is really just starting to see the Latinos in their churches. You know, we are a minority in the Episcopal Church, that's the truth. And, but we are growing. And the biggest challenge that we have is that we don't know each other. I think that's the biggest challenge that we have. But once we get to know each other, it doesn't really matter, you know, what culture or you come from. It's in a congregation. You can really come together. There's wonderful things that can happen. Obviously, there are the big challenge of racism, and I'm going to tell you something that happened to me that was unexpected. The first Sunday when I came to the church that I was invited to serve, at the end, a white person told me, "You're not welcome here. We were expecting a white priest in this church," and that was terrible. Terrible experience for me because I was new in the Episcopal Church and I was really excited about doing ministry there. But I realized that as a pastor, I had to embrace everyone. And a wonderful experience happened there. I stayed there for 9 years, and it was absolutely beautiful, you know. So once you get to know each other, in Christ, we can love each other, we can grow together, we can reach out to each other, and really the love of God is what brings us together and makes church possible in the community and bring the gospel out into the community. One of the things that I insisted in the churches that I've been is, what are we going to do together? How are we going to transform ourselves and transform the community together? And when you focus on that, then you start bringing people together. You forget about the differences because you have one goal, which is really, how are we going to transform our community? And really wonderful things happen. I'm really blessed that everywhere I've been, I have had wonderful experiences of faith.
Thank you.
I would say that there's two layers to this question. One is the diversity that you encounter within Latino communities. As we already said, they're not monolithic. They're not all Mexican. They're not all Mexicans from Chihuahua. You know, they're all very, very diverse. So already within a Hispanic community, you will have a rainbow of opportunities of how to serve that community. Not just, I'm not even involving white people here. It's like just within the Latino community. To the point that one of the best practices I have heard of other Hispanic churches is that they have a committee just to acknowledge all the different religious celebrations that people bring from Mexico, from Dominican Republic, from Colombia, from Costa Rica, and be able to have that whole variety of church celebrations within that experience of church. But that already gives you a glance of the tremendous inclusivity that you can expect of a Latino congregation, right? Because they don't see, having to celebrate Guadalupe or having to celebrate Los Angeles as a problem. They see it as an enriched opportunity to their own spiritual life. And that's the other thing, right? Latinos have that cultural sense of church and Christian life that they have. They bring that with them. If you want a congregation that prays for the growth of the church, just find a Latino congregation. And this is not, I'm not making this up just to make Latino sounds good. The Pew Research, the Pew Research back in 2014 did a study on recent immigrants. You can go back and look it up. And it actually says that, let me look at the actual number so I don't give you whatever I remember for this. It says that 56% of recent immigrants pray daily. 56% of them pray daily. And that compared to the normal Protestant evangelical, which prays 28% of them are only acknowledged to pray daily. So if you want a church that prays, just find a Latino community.
I believe that one of the big challenges of, and I believe that that goes maybe mainly to first generation Latino, is to find the way how you fit in and how you find your voice. Let me tell you this story that happened to me. And it's interesting because actually it's a story that is related with a conversation that I was having with one of my children. And one of my children's friends, returning them from the school that they were attending together, and just to take them home. So in my conversation in the car, I don't know where it came from, I told them, you know, I am an Afro-Latino. And my daughter jumped and said, Daddy, that doesn't exist. And then I needed to really go into explaining, yes, I'm an Afro-Latino. I'm black. See, I'm Latino. I'm Dominican. I'm Caribbean. All these, let's say, identities that you need to find place for them as you move on in a different culture, you know, dealing and struggling with a different language, creates a kind of sense of unfitting and unsettlement. And because we have to face the reality that, as you know, I believe it's Telemundo or Univision that once, you know, put up an announcement or advertisement that says, we all speak the same language, but we speak it differently. So there is that assumption, right? That because we all speak the same language, we all get along well. Not knowing that sometimes even in our own midst, you know, if you have a combination of different Latinos culture, different countries, you have really a real problem for people to come around a place where they feel they fit in this group, but also to come around a kind of solid sense of identity, understanding that you do not belong yet to the culture or new culture that you are embracing and that is receiving you. So I believe there is a cultural, real cultural challenge for any Latino, and like I said earlier, you know, I'm speaking from the perspective of a first-generation Latino, in trying to find ways to find your voice and your identity. I don't know how many of you had a chance to read something that I wrote early on when I came here at the cathedral. I was asked to write something for the article of the cathedral. And then I wrote, you know, the title that I chose for that was, I Am Black Until I Talk. And at some point, you know, people needed me to explain that. And I said, well, let me explain it to you. So when you look at me, before you know what before we introduce, what do you see? You're black. Yes. And now let me talk to you a little bit. What do you hear? Exactly. So there is that kind of, you know, back and forth that go, and that creates a serious barrier, but also a serious challenge for you to really feel at some point that you are settled and that you are in a place where you are ready or you want to belong.
Do you all think, this may be a silly question, but do you all think that the Episcopal Church can be a place where all people can belong? I did not give them that question beforehand, so they're going to get mad at me right now. I did not prepare you, but it just...
No, this is fine.
Yeah.
Well,
this is fine.
let me just say that I just told you that experience that was quite negative, but I also had another experience where I just was coming into the Episcopal Church as a layperson with my wife, And we went to this church in the Diocese of Chicago, and they were amazing. They welcome us as we have been there forever. And that was my first experience before I went to this church. And so I felt completely welcome, and I really felt at home. As a Latino with my wife from Mexico, a Colombian, with an accent, they really welcome us. And so I think hospitality is one of the values that we cherish more in the Episcopal Church. And I think we just need to extend it a little bit further to those that don't look like us, or they don't speak necessarily like our own language, or that share our same culture. And I think we have everything in the Episcopal Church to welcome everyone. And I'm proud to be an Episcopalian in many, many ways. I was in the Roman Church for many, many years, and I will never go back. Because the journey that the Episcopal Church has done to be able to include everyone is just amazing. Mm-hmm. It's been a struggle, but it's been an amazing journey. And so I think we need to be proud of that. And I think we need to continue to do that, be able to welcome all groups. As hard and difficult it is sometimes, because you have to stretch yourself culturally, and sometimes be around people that you never, spoke before, or you never really share many ministries, even, because if you speak different languages, sometimes it's really hard, but still, love is love, and you can welcome and love people wherever they are.
I started out my journey in the Episcopal Church in 1995. Were you born by then? So I started out my journey around that year, 1995. So that was in New York. And then my family and I moved to Washington, D.C. after spending a couple of years in Dominican Republic, returned to Virginia and then Maryland, and then, I entered in conversation with the Diocese of Washington. And I've been here for already almost 10 years. I believe that the Episcopal Church is not only ready for us. The Episcopal Church, my conviction is, need us.
Can you say that again? I think I missed it.
I'll say it this way. So it's not only that the Episcopal Church, right, is ready to embrace, or is embracing us, is that the Episcopal Church need us. If we are going to build what we call the realm of God, the kingdom of God, and we want that kingdom of God to look as the kingdom of God should look like, we need to be part of the identity of that kingdom. And we need to be part of the identity of the church. So I believe what I'm trying to say, there is a mutual need, and I hope that we all can at some point, agree on that. And because there is that mutual need to become that beloved community of God, we need to open, let's say, space for that community of love to really grow and nurture and become a sign of that kingdom of God that we want to be, and we know God wants.
I probably go back to something that Padre Simon said. The beginning, I'm a Latino who just came to this country a few years ago, and I have a lot of hope, tremendous hope, probably too much hope. And that puts me in a spectrum on this. Like, I feel sometimes frustrated that we are not doing it, but I have tremendous hope that in the Episcopal Church we have everything that we need to make it happen. Our baptismal covenant, our tremendous inclusivity and strive to welcome out the other. it seems like everything that we need to make it happen is already there, but yet we continue to have this conversation. And I know I've been in the Episcopal Church for about 8 years or so, and it seems like it's older than that. And that, it's like an inherited frustration that I have. But I do have the hope that we have everything we need.
Thank you. So one of the things that I want all of y'all who are participating here in this panel and for us to think about is, what is the difference between welcome and belonging? And I know that this conversation has been going around for a while, and we're really good at welcoming because we're fabulous. Hospitality is one of our values. But the idea of belonging, of making room, is where we need to take that next step to. What does it mean for people to belong, to truly feel they belong in a place, in our churches? What needs to change? So historically, Latino ministry in the Episcopal Church, and I say this with love and respect, has been treated as the charity case. It is the idea of, let us go help those poor people. So my next question to the panel is, in predominantly white congregations who want to start to be involved in Latino ministry, how do we change the conversation of doing ministry for Latinos to doing ministry with Latinos? So what would be some of your advice to some of our audience here of what churches need to change or think about and pray about in order to make that switch of doing ministry with Latinos?
I can start, because I think we already touched on some of this. One of the first things that everybody needs to pray about on this is the tremendous cultural sensitivity that you will need to have. Because as you heard, even this panel, right, we inherited from Mexico, Costa Rica, Dominican Republic, Colombia. You can find a whole spectrum of people that you are all labeling as Hispanic/Latino coming into your church. And that means that you're going to have a tremendous cultural flexibility to be able to do that well. Because you're never going to find a monolith culture of Hispanics that will come to you if you really intentionally welcome them in and give them a room to belong. And then you need to make sure you have Hispanic leadership doing this. Even from a Hispanic trying to do this, as you heard it from our friends here who have a lot more experience than me, it's hard. You're going to find some things that are hard. The whole idea, and just to be clear about not sell you any fantasy, the whole idea of colorism in the Latino community is strong. It's strong. And it's hard. We inherited this whole idea from the colonial time, that the whiter you look, the better you are. And it's inherited. It is like this cultural, colonization of the mind that has been perpetuated for centuries. So even on that, you have to be extremely careful, right? And the closer the leadership of your church looks to the Latinos that you're trying to welcome, the easier it's going to go. But not without challenges or difficulties.
I would like to offer two brief examples of how that can happen. Let me first tell you a brief story. Like around 2010, walking into his church in Washington, D.C., Church of the Incarnation, a lot of people who are about my age used that church as Church of the Insurrection for the work that Church of the Incarnation was doing back, to the civil rights movement in supporting that. So that Latino man walked into the church and walked into the parish hall. and open his arm wide like this and express in loud voice, this is what I like about this church, that all that is in here is mine. And you know, it took us a little bit of time to really realize what he was talking about. And he was not talking about my belonging, my property. He was talking about, I belong here. This is home to me. So the second part is, you know, about 2 years ago, something like that, this diocese of Texas came up with a strategic vision plan to work around multicultural, multi-ethnic, the multicultural, multi-ethnic expression that it is in this diocese. And part of this plan, actually, that is already in motion, is to, one, encourage congregation to really work around bringing more clergy of color where they are. Encourage congregation in the diocese itself to bring up and raise vocations, you know, of people of color, because that's how it grows. And also to make sure that in the different institutions of the diocese, that gradually a process of people of color being appointed to key positions. That is important. And that means, you know, it takes a significant amount of effort to do that, but it also takes a significant amount of intentionality and wanting to do it. And I believe that is going to happen, and gradually we'll continue moving that way. I've been here in this congregation, like I said earlier, for about 10 years already. And I can tell you and attest to how gradually this congregation, the 1 o'clock congregation, Latino ministry that I lead, and the morning congregation have open spaces for becoming more together, you know, for as many opportunity and possibility it has, whether it is for May Faith, or it is for Las Posadas, or it is organizing and creating opportunity for bilingual services, of which you are going to have a taste this evening here, bringing people from the 1 o'clock congregation, from the, let's say, the Spanish-speaking congregation to the vestry, sending people from the 1 o'clock congregation to the council, and involving people in all possible areas that you can imagine to the life and ministry of this church. I believe that moved you for a very second, let's say, citizenship to be a citizen in full. And that is just great.
I just wanted to add, how do you make room? And one of the things that I always tell congregation institutions is look at your budget. Look at your budget. What is your budget saying? What are the lines in there? Because ultimately, this speaks of what you believe, where you put your money, you know. And if you really want a Latino congregation in your church, you need a Latino priest. To be able to bring a Latino priest, it's very, or invest yourself into learning the language and learning the culture. In the church that I minister right now, the pastor there, he was a white man, and he saw that the Latino were coming into the neighborhood, and he went to Mexico and stayed for 4 months and learned Spanish, and he became completely fluent, and he ministered to that congregation for 25 years, and he was amazing. He was an amazing pastor. And he had to fight, you know, for the white families that were there, the white group, mostly white, to really open spaces for the Latino community that was coming into that neighborhood. And he did it graciously, with love, being a pastor for everyone. I met him. He's now in heaven, but he became a really good friend of mine. And I learned a lot from him, how he did that, being a white person who really understood that he needed to be a pastor for everyone in that community, in the congregation and outside in the community.
Gracias. So I want you all to start thinking of some questions that you may have for the panel, because we want to be able to have a conversation with all of y'all. But the last question that I will ask is, what does inclusive liturgy look like?
I'll start. Inclusive liturgy, first, even within Latino communities, is bilingual. Our church, as I mentioned, is 100% Hispanic, and we worship bilingually on Sundays because the younger generation prefer English, and the parents are okay with flipping back and forth. So it's like a Spanglish service. That's what it is. But everybody's happy with the Spanglish, and they're happy that their kids kind of understand what we're doing, and they're happy that we all understand what we're doing. And that's the first part. And the second part is the music needs to be very cognizant of the cultures. And this is, again, just to go back to what I've been saying today, it's like you're gonna find different expressions, and we might have the same hymn in Costa Rica than in Mexico, where we sing it in a different tune. So being aware of those differences is gonna be a challenge, but being inclusive of the Hispanic music and the different rhythms is super important to create a truly inclusive liturgy.
I'll probably will add to that to be very intentional about the distribution of language. If you are going to have a liturgy that is intended to be bilingual, just make sure that you have an equal representation of language in it, and in what is written and what is spoken, and what is said here and what is said behind the altar. Because that definitely makes a kind of huge difference and bring more, let's say, wholeness to the whole body that is present there. When in a, let's say, liturgy that you are intending to make it bilingual and make it multicultural and to represent all present, it is important to make sure that language matters, and that the language represents, or at least, touch the heart of those who are in the congregation. I'll say that just as one other ingredient to that. You mentioned music, I believe. All right.
You can say more about this.
Well, all I can say is make sure that if you, even in Latino congregation, where there are more than just one nationality, make sure that you are also intentional about the rhythm that you choose. I mean, that makes you feel like if you know there are Caribbean in your church, then play Caribbean music. Include that in your services. If you know there are many South American people in your church, then use South American rhythm and music that represents these countries. If you know
so again, I'm hearing, don't always use mariachi. Right?
Don't always do mariachi, because mariachi is just one of the many expressions that Mexico has. Even Mexico has more than mariachis. Yes. So why, if Mexico has more than mariachi, we only have to live with mariachi here in this part of the world? That's what I'm trying to say.
Oh, that's another workshop in itself. There's just a variety of things that we have from southern Mexico, and there's a lot of the indigenous, what's the word in English? Sabor, flavor. The indigenous flavor, the instruments that are used, it's very different. Mariachi is typically only used in northern Mexico or central Mexico, but the more south you get, the rhythm changes. I'm not a music person, I just can tell you it's different. Sorry to interrupt on that question.
No, it's all right. No,
I just want to throw my mariachi thing out there.
Well, I've been in bilingual churches in all my ministry, and let me tell you, this is difficult to do, because when you do a bilingual service, for example, every Sunday, when you speak to in Spanish, those that don't understand, you lose them for a while, and then same happens with the other group. And so I don't do a lot of bilingual services. That's just me. I do it, once in a while. I bring everybody together and have a lot of food and fun. And then I do an English service, and I do the Latino service. The English service, I enjoy the old music. I love it. but I also enjoy the salsa music at the 11:30. So I kind of enjoy both spectrums, and I like it. I enjoy it. And I said it's once in a while we have bilingual services where we bring everybody, especially when we do a festival where we do something, there's a lot of food and we can enjoy the cultures of everybody. But in the liturgy, it's been my experience really hard to do it every Sunday. Because you pray in the language that you grew up with. That's what I prefer too, even though I've been speaking, trying to speak English for 25 years now, but I still, pray in Spanish, which is the language that I grew up with. So I think that's important because you have to respect where people are, and don't force also anything to people. You can ban a lot, but when you pray, it's just my opinion. I think it's important to be respectful also. Because I have had people that laughed and I didn't know why. And I realized that we had started to force things that were just a little bit too much for them to be able to stay in prayer together. They could go and do like festivals, health rallies, things like that, where you can just be informal and do, But the liturgy is very difficult, so you have to be very respectful and pay attention to what you're doing.
Thank you. So I hope you really are coming up with some really good questions out there. Yes.
Thank you for educating us and sharing your ideas. One question I have is, as we are developing ways to welcome the Latinx community into our church, into our parish, one concern we have heard is the fear for our undocumented siblings of immigration issues. Can you speak to that at all?
I'm going to try to. You say that there's a fear to receive, or the fear that immigrants are feeling?
Well, let me give you a scenario. We have a program in the summertime to provide food in backpacks to help with food insecurity. And there, for many years, has been a child we have watched grow up who is Nancy. And one time I said to her, Nancy, we would love if you would come and join us, bring your mom, bring your dad. She said to me, she is also undocumented. She said to me, my father goes from home to work, work to home, because he's undocumented, and he's terrified he's going to get picked up on the street sometime. And we live in a small, rural community, but his fear is his fear, it's real.
Yes, definitely. That fear is very real. And in cases like that, what my suggestion would be is not how do we get them to come to the church, but how can the church serve them where they are? So maybe a conversation of just coming and doing a house blessing. Something really small it's what's going to be helpful, especially as we are getting near the election. We are going to continue to see how undocumented folks, asylum seekers and refugees are going to be demonized in the media and be the political pawns. So you are going to be experiencing even more fear from the undocumented community. But the church is where the undocumented community feels safest. Undocumented folks rarely ever report crimes or go to therapists or even seek medical help because of the fear that they will get deported. But the church is a place where they can come and pray. If they're afraid to leave home, how can the church show up for them? Yes, any other perspective on that?
I have a question for my brother priest on the right here. You described a pretty painful racist experience in your church. struggled with what do you do when somebody doesn't like you for whatever reason, but that's pretty severe. And I think just want to know, how did you respond? You did say that you felt like you had to continue to love them, which I think is very noble, but some priests would just kind of say, well, that's a border, a boundary I'm not willing to cross, and you can be cared for by somebody else. So how did you take,
Well, I think it's important to understand where the congregation that you're coming into is and why they are where they are. And so in this case, the neighborhood had changed completely, and the white congregation had dwindled down, and they were very resentful. And the bishop knew that the majority of people coming around were Latino, and they really need to reach out to the Latinos. But they didn't prepare the congregation for my coming. So I came and I spoke to 3 or 4 people, and they said, oh, we're wonderful, welcome, welcome. But the congregation was not really prepared for me coming, and for what they needed to do, really, to reach out. And so there was, it was hard. I can't, and this happened a couple times to me. When I came here to Texas also, the congregation, very similar situation. And I had a couple of people also that they had kind of a hold to the power there, because they didn't have priests for about 4 years. And so they were like holding on to whatever they have left. And they also were but I had already kind of experienced that, and I knew how to kind of wiggle around and just be gracious and also firm in the idea of change. I knew, and I told them honestly, I said, this is going to change. The vestry is not going to be 9 people, white people. This is going to change, because the Latino community is here and is growing, and you are not. And you probably are, the majority of the white families had already left the neighborhood. So it was painful, but at the same time, I think my experience here in Texas, I had quite a few white members there, that they were very gracious. They understood. They had prepared a little bit better for my coming there, and so it was a little bit easier.
Any other questions? Yes. It's not about music, right? Because I won't be able to answer it.
What is your guidance on Latino, Latinx, and the Latino? How do you recommend addressing respectfully the community?
Ask them. Ask which one do you prefer. And I say that not kidding. Latinx is an academic term that most people out in our community don't know or care about. So we use that, no disrespect, we use Latinx because we're trying to be woke and inclusive, but really most of the Latinos really don't care. And they're like, that doesn't make sense because the X, you can't read it. So if you're gonna be inclusive in the language, use Latine, which is the Spanish version of Latinx. And in Spanish, it makes sense because the E is the gender neutral. But again, I would advise, if you having a conversation and relationship with someone, it's like, what do you prefer? Because some people prefer Hispanic. There's also like a lot of tension between the word Hispanic or Latino, depending on where you're from.
Yep.
So ask the younger generation, Generation C and Alpha, are the ones more prone to use Latinx or Latine. The older generations, just let them be Mexicanos, Colombianos, let them be whatever nationality they are.
Yeah. I'm included.
You're included on that?
Maybe
This
Dominican.
whole generation.
Yeah.
I'm including this generation to be Dominicano or Latino,
Yeah.
et cetera, et cetera. You're right. Very right.
Or any other,
No, that's exactly right.
That's perfect.
I love that conversation, just gets me going.
I don't know if you touched on this, I just stepped out for a moment. What if you speak to like the larger, affluent white church partnering with a Latino parish, and how to approach that, and if you've seen any challenges or some of the successes of having that partnership?
So we did touch on it a little bit. I think there's a couple of successes we can talk about. Do you want to keep?
Yeah, in the Diocese of Chicago, I was in this white congregation that welcomed us when I was in the process, and they were very good to me. And so, actually, they offered me to stay there in that congregation. It was one of the wealthiest in Chicago. But I told them, I have a calling, and I think I really need to go to a Latino, that's my calling. And I said, why don't you support that ministry down there? And it was really good because they had a lot of resources, not only money, but they had all kinds of people with all kinds of skills that they were able to come and help us start a food pantry, start a nonprofit organization. Really, the buildings were completely in need of repair. So we did a lot of work, and it was really a wonderful partnership. Now, what I had challenged them to do is to do his Latino ministry in their congregation, but they did not want to do that, which is really more challenging. It's much easier just to, help out, but to do Latino ministry in your congregation, that's a higher calling. Well, I think, and that's really a challenge for many Anglo congregations, to be honest with you, because whenever you look at your population, 5 miles around your church, what do you see? Look at the numbers. And you either, if you're really honest, you're going to have a very serious conversation. Because if those people are not in your church, then you really need to have a very serious conversation. Why is that? And then that really takes a lot of leadership and really open yourself up to include those who are not there. And unfortunately, it's not just white people, it's just everybody. Latinos, when we see African American people in our neighborhood, they don't speak Spanish, so that we don't reach out to them because, it's just easier and more comfortable to be in our own culture with our own people. So it's a challenge. It's really a challenge. But I think we really need to move that way. As we were talking about, especially in Texas. I mean, we have a very, very diverse community. There's people coming from all over the world to Texas, not only Latinos. And they are in our neighborhoods.
There are at least 48 different nationalities in any given Sunday worshiping in this diocese of Texas. That's a lot of nationalities. So when I was still functioning as Latino missionary for the Diocese of Washington, I had to lead a process of merging an English-speaking congregation with a Latino congregation that is very successful now. I don't know if you have heard the name of Iglesia San Mateo in Washington, D.C., in the Diocese of Washington. It took a lot of conversation, and it always helped to have somewhat the perspective of the diocese and somebody from the diocese being involved in this conversation, setting well the ground for a clear understanding of what that congregation is going to look like, and making sure that the new coming congregation into the building will not at any point become the only sole voice of this congregation, and how to continue or keep both sides empowered, right, in a way that their vestry is actually a mixture of 6 and 6, or whatever number the vestry decided to be, to make it equal. It takes time to do that, and also a lot of good intention in making it happen. Understanding that there is always a lot of fear to what you don't know, and that there is a lot of reaction to what you don't know, but you don't know where these reactions are coming from.
Yeah. So we're nearing the end of our time, and I know there were other questions, so feel free to catch us afterwards to ask any questions. I just want to leave you out with a couple of things. As the church, We need to expand the race conversation beyond white and black. We need to be able to have really honest conversations about what it means to let go of power and raise up leaders who will eventually take your place. Those leaders may look very different than your grandkids. Are you okay with that? Inclusive liturgy, if one person, one Spanish-speaking person comes into your church, it would be beautiful if the next Sunday they showed up, at least the gospel was in Spanish. Small steps. Don't try to transform it overnight, but take little steps to make sure that your parish, your congregation, is a place where people can see themselves belonging and growing, and a place where their children will be saved. The conversation about immigration is a conversation that is important, not just in Latino communities. So let's get some education on who the asylum seekers are, the refugees. How are we, as faith leaders, welcoming them and providing a place of safety for them without being political or divisive? But how can we have some of those conversations? Lastly, for most, and I won't say all, most Latinos, we worship with our bodies. So just be prepared for movement, for praise, a little bit more loud. We like to meditate, but not that much. By all means, please, please, do not play Alabaré in the organ. Alabaré is a very well-known hymn. Get a guitarist, get a piano. Not everything needs to be played by the organ. So with that, I want to invite all of you to stand up. And I can't sing, but you're going to follow me. Alabaré, pretty much what it's saying is, I will praise. Alabaré, 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 alabaré a mi Señor. I will praise, I will praise, I will praise my Lord. As we begin to get ready to praise and enter our closing worship, let's sing that. All right, so it's alabaré, alabaré,
Alabaré, alabaré, alabaré a mi Señor.
Again.
Alabaré, 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 alabaré a mi Señor.
Okay, with feeling.
Alabaré, 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 alabaré a mi Señor.
If you cannot say the words, alabaré, alabaré, raise your hand, don't be shy. Alabaré a mi Señor. Yes, it might feel a little uncomfortable, but we just praise together. We just worship together for a second. Let us make sure we're doing the work that all people can feel they can worship with us and be a part of our church. Amen? Amen. Gracias.